landscape. It requires that you be physically fit to do work. I'm not in such good shape anymore, but it's a very, very challenging landscape with very large rock shelters that you see here. And you can see the people, very small, climbing here up the canyon, up the side of the canyon. These rock shelters contain vast archaeological deposits in excess sometimes of 10 meters. They are the best preserved, or some of the best preserved archaeological remains or records of hunter-gatherer lifeways in North America. And it's on both sides that we have, both in the United States and in Mexico. This is, for those who may not know, this is Jean-Claude right here, who is a famous archaeologist, rock art researcher, who thinks that the Pecos River style rock art is, we say it in English, the cat's meow. How does that, do you all say the same thing? The cat's meow? No. It's, he likes it a lot. This is a shelter known as Parita Shelter, and you can see again the depth of the deposit. Here is a person going up. These are some examples of some of the artifacts that we have that are preserved in these deposits. They date back to at least 14,000 years, but likely also Paleo-Indian. Yeah, yes. This is a very interesting material culture that we call them painted pebbles. We have a profound number of them. I think one of my colleagues has now analyzed over 900 of these painted pebbles, and they often look very much like this. This is the view from inside the shelter I just showed you. And I've included it because I think it's important to understand this is the Rio Bravo. Well, actually it's Amistad Reservoir. And of course, this is Mexico, and this is a canyon called Parita Canyon. There are rock paintings in that canyon that have not been documented or investigated yet. Some of you may be familiar with the book by Solveig Turpin. She's done a book on the rock art of Coahuila, and it has some beautiful examples of Pecos River style rock art. Some of the figures are identical to the ones that I study in the United States. We have both petroglyphs and pictographs, but much fewer petroglyphs than we have pictographs. These are photographs from a site known as Lewis Canyon, and it's about 10 acres. I don't know how to translate that to hectares. Okay.
It's like 300 meters by 50 meters.
Okay. 300 meters by 50 meters. That is just covered, the ground is covered with these petroglyphs, but there are not very many of these sites that we know of. Most of the rock art that we have falls into one of these four categories: Pecos River style, red monochrome, red linear, and historic period. Today, we'll be talking only about the Pecos River style. These are very large murals in many cases. This is an example of just 10 meters of a mural that is 30 meters in length. We have 30 radiocarbon dates for this style. They range from around 4,200 years ago to 1450 years ago. So it's a long time that this particular style was produced. The paintings are done in four colors predominantly: red, yellow, black, and white. In this picture, you can see some intrusive art that's done in a brilliant orange. It's not a part of the original mural. If I forget anything, you say so.
Okay.
I've included this photograph so that you can get a sense of scale. These figures are often very, very tall. This one is 3.5 meters in height. The anthropomorphs are very diverse in their form. They have many, many different types of attributes. They're very complex. You can see here in these images examples of different types of anthropomorphs. They're portrayed sometimes with no heads, with decorations on their body, with paraphernalia, with various types of headdresses, adornments, so much detail was given to these figures. In some cases, the artist chose to paint 3 fingers on one hand, 5 on the other, and 4 toes. Everything carries meaning with these paintings.
Yeah. Okay, everything's okay.
Everything's good?
Yes.
These anthropomorphic figures are joined by zoomorphs, as you see here. The predominant animals that we have portrayed in the art are deer and feline. This feline from Panther Cave is 3 meters in length, from its head to its hind quarters. Next to it, you see a deer image from a site called Mystic Shelter. This is very typical of the Pecos River style. We also have reptilian figures, such as this horned serpent. This rock shelter, these paintings have been dated to around 3,400 years ago. One radiocarbon date for this mural that dates to around 3,400 years ago. It is a horned serpent with a human form in its antlers or in its horns. And it's very interesting because here is the end of the figure. Let me go back so this is out of the way. This is the tail, this is the head. Most of the tail has been lost because of the water seat. There's a water seat right at the very end of the tail of this serpent figure. And some of you may also notice a symbol here that may look somewhat familiar, an S-shaped curve, somewhat like a Shonakawili. We also have figures that defy categorization at this point. They're not human, they're not animal. They may be geometric forms, they may be various types of amorphous forms, very complex figures. These are very difficult to categorize, but we collect attribute data on these in excess of 124 attributes for each one of these enigmatic figures. When I first started working in the Lower Pecos was a long time ago, 1989. I came to the Lower Pecos as an artist. I was working as a muralist at the time, and I just was wanting to see the oldest known art in Texas. And so I started studying the rock art of the Lower Pecos. And I think this was an important thing because I was accustomed to working at a very large scale. I was not immediately intimidated by the massive murals. And I think that that was a big help to me. But what I read in the literature was that these murals, that the rock art panels were just a random collection of images painted over hundreds and thousands of years. I saw compositions, but I was an artist, and I knew no one would listen to me as an artist. So I went to get my PhD in archaeology so that I could understand the language of the archaeologist and hopefully learn from them and also share what I knew as an artist. And as an artist, I also wanted to know, how did they do this? How did they make the paint? What did they use for brushes? How did they get as high as they did to paint some of these murals? So I did some experimental archaeology to try to replicate the paint. We knew from research that had been conducted that there was an organic binder in the paint. No one knew for sure what that organic binder was. There was speculation that maybe it was blood. That's possible, and I believe it likely could have been incorporated, but we have white paintings. So blood is not going to be in the white paintings or the yellow paintings. There, speculation of egg whites, I don't know.
Clara de huevo.
Yeah. But again, as an artist, I saw the fine lines that continued for, in some cases, as much as 10 meters, beautiful fluid lines. I thought they must have had an animal fat, some kind of fat to use as a binder. So I began experimenting. We knew that there were mineral pigments, and we knew what the mineral pigments were. Hematite, manganese, different types of ochre. But again, what did they do after that? We knew they ground the pigments, but what did they mix it with? This is a photograph of a piece of pigment that was recovered from an archaeological site. And this is a big, big piece of pigment that was recovered from an archaeological site. Just incredible. The types of brushes that have been recovered from the deposits, these are replicas, but they're made with lechuguilla fiber, but also, of course, animal hair. And feathers. I think there could have been many different things that were used. So I started with the experiment, grinding and grinding and grinding the mineral pigment, which is not easy. It takes a long time sometimes to get the fine powder that you have to get. Then I started experimenting with the bone marrow of a deer. And it was, in ethnography, I knew that the bone marrow was very sacred and that there was, in the ethnography, evidence of bone marrow being used in the production of paint. So I used the bone marrow and mixed it with the mineral pigment. What that creates is a sticky mess, basically. It forms like a paste. So then I needed an emulsifier, something to thin the paint down. So my husband is a botanist, an archaeologist and a botanist, and he said, why not yucca, soap root? And I thought, of course. Again, it's a sacred plant. That makes sense. So I started processing the yucca. I tried many different things. Bottom line, all you have to do is pound it. You peel the root, pound it, put it in water, and then squeeze it into the paste. This is the mineral pigment and the animal fat, and it makes the most glorious paint that you can imagine. Silky, very nice paint, like what you see here. Another thing I experimented with was, in some cases, the lines were so fine, I wondered if they prepared the canvas, if they prepared the rock surface first. And so I experimented with different things. And the mucilage from prickly pear is incredible. It worked beautifully to prepare the surface before the paint is applied.
Con la tuna se preparó, se hizo una imprimatura. Se hizo una imprimatura, sí.
So it was interesting. After I had done some of that work at Texas A&M, they began analyzing the paint, and they did some DNA studies on the paint and found that the organic pigment or the organic material was likely the animal fat from an ungulate, either bison or deer. So it was confirmation of what I had been looking at. but this shouldn't surprise us. This is in ethnography, okay? So the pigments, the binder, the emulsifier, and a primer. There may have been many other things added. Some of the studies have found fragments of bone mixed into the paint, which I find fascinating as the possibility of why they may have included bone fragment in the paint as well. And it's not animal bone. These murals, as I said, are big. This is just to give you a sense of scale again. Some of you may know Kike. He came and studied with us. He's a student of Laura Solar. And some very, very large figures. This individual is 6 foot tall.
6'5".
6'5", so he is
Very tall.
2.5 meters or so. This is a tall figure, and there are more paintings up above.
Está más alto que tú, Andrea. Sí.
This makes documentation a challenge. It also requires that you not have a fear of heights. This is me up on top of the ladder. I will go to all heights to document rock art. That I was at the base of the panel. There were more paintings above where I am. Yeah. And here there are paintings on the ceiling that you can see me reaching out toward. And again, another figure that's 10 meters in height. And you can see the person here at the bottom. And the lines on these are as straight as what you see here. Perfectly straight, all the way down. Beautiful taper, all the way down. When I first started doing work, I was told that the artists were under the influence of hallucinogens when they painted these paintings. I think it would be very difficult to paint these paintings when you are stoned or high.
En esa época prevalecía la teoría de estados alterados de conciencia y entonces imagínense aplicar eso.
So obviously they had scaffolding. And I wish I had scaffolding when I was documenting the rock art, but it's not easy to get the scaffolding to the rock art sites. But that's what we need. I have a great appreciation for the artists of these murals. They have the different painting techniques, wet applied and dry applied, that you can see both in this slide. This is from a site known as Halo Shelter. This is an example, of course, of wet applied paint, where the lines are very fluid. And they also have dry applied. I'm beginning to suspect that in some cases, the dry applied is, they start with the dry, and then they add the emulsifier and the fat, and actually use the pigment that they've applied to the wall and turn that into the paint right on the wall in some cases. Another very interesting thing that we have are scratched and incised lines in the pictographs. At first, we thought that this must be vandalism, but it's not. We have it occurring on a figure and then more paint on top of the scratch. So this is something that's being done in prehistory, and it's sometimes very intense, as you see in this example, on this feline's face.
El esgrafiado que se hacía sobre la pintura. ¿Sí?
¿Por qué se ve blanco abajo?
It's the limestone that's scratched through the paint.
It's not a stucco or
No,
stucco.
no, it's scratched through to the limestone underneath.
Okay, thank you.
They also do a lot of incorporation, where they incorporate the image with the natural structure of the wall, such as in this example, where the mouth of this deer has the paint going around the hole that's right in front of it. It's just beautiful. This is done over and over again. And oftentimes it's overlooked in documentation. We don't always pay attention to everything that is in context with this. But this is an interesting figure for more than that reason, because it also shows overpainting, where they've come back, or someone has, and touched up the painting. You can see a lighter shade of red, almost a red-orange, over a dark red in those locations that I've marked in squares. Ujú.
Que esto no es inusual porque en toda la pintura de Baja California durante 8,000 años se repintaron las mismas figuras y eso ya está perfectamente bien registrado.
We don't see it as much in the Lower Pecos, so I was very glad to see this. And also that fine wash of paint that's been applied later was over the top of an area that had previously been scratched. That confirms that it was done, the scratching was done in prehistory. This figure is also associated with dry applied, almost like Crayola marks associated with it. We have one example of a very large stencil. In this case, it is as though they made, cut out of leather or something, the form of the figure, and then sprayed the paint over the top. You can see in this slide here, this is the arm right here, and it goes down, and it has fingers that have been applied positive, but the body is negative. And it has paraphernalia associated with it as well that they did positive. If at any point this doesn't make sense, please say, explain. And I think, again, working as an artist has been a benefit because some of these very, very tall paintings, people have speculated that the artist put a brush on the end of a very long pole, and then they painted the image. This figure that you see, this is a meter pole that we attached a scale on because it's so high up, we can't get to it, okay? But I want you to see how finely done this line is of this around this head. Look at that. That is exquisite. That's not done at the end of a pole. Incredible. It looks almost like they had some kind of a stencil or something that they were working from to make sure that they paid perfect attention to detail.
Más que usted.
Yeah. Also, very difficult. We were talking about white paint earlier. You can barely see now just a fine evidence of a white line that goes around the outside of this figure's head. This is an example. This was fun for me when we were documenting it because I could see the artist's hand in a way. You could see where, you know, when you paint something and you apply the paint and then you remove what you've used as a straight edge and it leaves the line, you know, and that's what this was. You could see all the way down the figure where they used a straight edge to produce the fine line that went along the outside. Tremendous attention to detail. Tremendous attention to detail. All of these types of things are what we are documenting in our project, the Rock Art Preservation Initiative that we're doing now. I presented on this already twice on Monday and on Tuesday. I won't go into extreme detail on some of the techniques. I'll focus mostly on some of the techniques used for identifying stratigraphy, the order in which the paint was applied to the wall. The site I'll be speaking about this afternoon is the White Shaman site. So the examples I will use today are from the White Shaman site. So I'll talk some about the documentation process so that you'll understand and what informed the future work.
Tell them that they can get
Oh, yeah.
more details.
If you're interested in getting a copy of the process, please let us know. Vicki has cards, I have cards, and we'll send it to you. We have a manual, very big manual, that we are currently publishing or working to get published online, and it will be available as well. The site that I'll be speaking to you about today is known as the White Shaman Shelter. This gives you a sense of its location. It's facing southwest, and it's only about maybe a quarter of a mile, don't know what that is in meters, not very far from Mexico, very, very close. We've documented the site using 3 different types, or mapped the site using unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, LiDAR, laser mapping, and a technique called structure from motion photogrammetry. I won't be going into that discussion today, but if you have interest in knowing how to do 3D modeling at a low cost, please talk to us and we'll get you some information.
Quickly,
So, yeah.
para la foto satelital utilizan los drones, que también sirve para localizar los sitios, y las otras técnicas es para poder reconstruir de manera muy detallada todos los murales, y en particular la técnica de LiDAR permite reconstrucciones 3D de niveles menores al milímetro. Vamos a ver, are you going to show the animation?
I can. I
Okay.
have later.
Okay.
We could do that in a break or something.
Okay.
¿Es con método láser?
Sí, láser.
Laser.
Láser.
Nomás que ese es el más caro.
This produces very high resolution, very high quality maps that go down to sub-centimeter and in some cases sub-millimeter resolution. At the White Shaman mural, we've documented 42 anthropomorphs, 6 zoomorphs, and 62 enigmatics. Each one of these figures is given its own unique identification code, as you see here, that includes the archaeological site number, what type of figure it is, and its figure number. This is the 15th anthropomorph documented at this site. After we have given a unique number to these figures, we use a total data station to map them on the landscape, to shoot the figures in, as you see here. And we produce 3D models. This is an example of a 3D model that we then combine with the data from the total data station. So that, as you see here, each of these green points is the location of that figure in that mural. Those are then tied to the broader landscape, and we can begin looking at patterns across the landscape, locations of different figures and where they're located and what they are in association with. For each one of these figures, we collect a tremendous amount of data. Again, I'm not going into the detail here, but we collect a tremendous amount of data. And to guarantee data integrity and consistency in the identification of different attributes, we use a manual that we've developed that defines clearly all of our terms so that everyone is speaking the same language.
Sí, esto es muy importante, muy rápido, que tienen alrededor de 100 atributos cada una de las categorías que se utilizan, y entonces son las que definen en qué categoría entra cada una de ellas, y toda esta información se va a la base de datos en las tablets. Se consulta la base de datos y hay ilustraciones para confirmar si sí pertenecen o no pertenecen a una u otra categoría.
So this is a step that I consider to be crucial, because the analysis that you'll see next after this presentation depends on this type of data collection. I've already used this quote many times. Many of you have seen this, but I think it's so important that we remember that the artist did not just apply those attributes, that whatever they used to define that figure carried meaning. And it's our responsibility to then capture that. It would be otherwise like transcribing something and leaving several words out. You wouldn't get the full meaning.
Sí, la hipótesis principal de Carolyn es que todos los elementos que aparecen en las pinturas rupestres tienen una intencionalidad y un sentido y están ahí por alguna razón, no son casuales, y en ese sentido es indispensable hacer un registro minucioso para que todos estos detalles que son portadores de significado puedan incluirse a la hora de hacer el análisis y la interpretación.
We have to assume this until proven otherwise.
Hasta que no le prueben lo contrario, creo que no se lo han probado.
We use different types of figure illustration, or have through the years, on-site illustration of a figure. Also, which is limited, it depends a lot on the skill of the worker. And when you're using volunteers, they don't always do such a good job. Light tables, like you see here, are a wonderful, inexpensive way to produce very good illustrations. But my second, maybe also co-best friend with the Dynalite, is this instrument that is a Wacom Cintiq interactive pen display, in which you draw digitally directly on the screen with the photograph, the digital image visible. And you do this in Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, whichever is your preference. And you can then create layer by layer the image, color by color, layer by layer. It's wonderful. And it's a good way to keep history of a figure. For example, if Vicky illustrates an image and then I come along later and I see something different, her layers, what she's drawn has her name. I add my layer and it's got my name. And it keeps a history of different interpretations of what it is that's been seen. It's marvelous, marvelous.
Esta herramienta es muy interesante y muy útil porque sobre la foto ya de alta resolución, en pantalla, con un lápiz digital, se hacen las calcas de elemento por elemento, y a partir de esas calcas se hacen reproducciones que pueden llegar a ser del tamaño natural y terminal, con todos los detalles incluidos, capa por capa, y cada uno de estos elementos entra a la base de datos que luego van a ver que está incluida en un sistema de clasificación estratigráfico.
And this is a quote I think we should all live by. I have learned that what I have not drawn, I have never really seen. And that when I start to draw an ordinary thing, I realize how extraordinary it is, sheer miracle. I just think that's the greatest quote. So, as I said, we do this work directly on these tablets, on the Wacom Cintiq or Wacom Cintiq. And what you'll see here is how this essentially works. I will start this process, I'll start the slide, and then it will show you each individual layer as it's applied to this, for this section of the mural.
Y esto permite tener un análisis súper sistemático de cómo se dio el proceso pictórico.
Depending on how detailed you want to be, you can create a layer called, we have a layer called spalled. I don't know how to spell that. It's where the rock has fallen away like this. Okay, you know what I mean?
Sí.
So that you can actually create a layer that makes it look exactly as it is now, or you can make it look as though it might have looked in the very beginning.
Sí, aquí se puede hacer una imagen que muestre tal como está el día de hoy, incluidos los efectos del deterioro, o crear una imagen que permite producir una supuesta versión original sin el deterioro que ha provocado el paso del tiempo y la influencia de los elementos sobre el lugar.
But before you can do this, actually using the Wacom Cintiq forces you to do is to look at its stratigraphy in a way you may not have looked at before, because you're forced to determine layers. So we began analyzing not just the stratigraphic relationship between figures, as you see here, but the stratigraphic relationship between colors within a figure, to know the order in which the paint was applied to create that figure. The problem is that's not always easy. And you can see here, we get frustrated sometimes because you can't determine it in the field. So we needed to find another way to study stratigraphy beyond using a loop.
Entonces, a simple vista ni con lupa no se puede hacer, pero afortunadamente existe que es el otro mejor amigo de Carolyn de por vida, y que es un aparato que va a describir.
Yeah. This is a digital microscope, and you can see me operating it here. And I'm holding the microscope. It's connected by a USB to this laptop. And this individual, Mark Willis, is actually taking photographs of what the microscope is seeing. So I determine what I need to study, where I need to study it, and then take the photograph. These are two examples that you can see where I could not determine this with the naked eye, that the yellow was clearly over the red paint, and this is at 50 power, and in this case at 200 power. Impossible to know without the use of the digital microscope that the red paint is applied over the top of the black. My life changed. It was revolutionized by this, and you'll understand why soon. When I was doing the illustrations, the digital illustrations, I was doing this figure, this deer that has black dots. I wanted to put the red deer form first and add the black dots. When I had drawn this by hand, that's what I did. But now I was being forced to look at what was the order, what came first, the red or the black. This is a microscopic image of one of these locations on that figure. And you can see the red paint clearly over the black. Throughout the entire figure, that's what we found. So when it was painted, it started like this. You can imagine my surprise. They painted the dots, and then they added the red paint. So that was a wonderful tool, and it continues to be very useful. Another tool we're using now to help understand stratigraphy, as well as what chemical elements are used to produce the paint, is something called portable X-ray fluorescence. It will tell you the chemical elements, manganese, iron, and so forth that's in the paint. Iron, the red paint we know is made from iron. The black paint we know is made from manganese. On this particular figure, I knew for sure that it had 11 black dots. But in this area, there is so much accretion. I don't know if that's an understandable word, but so much obscuring that portion, I couldn't tell if there was
Estaba
a dot.
velada esa parte y era imposible a simple vista determinar si existía un 12avo punto o no existía.
Yeah. So using this, we were able to take a reading here, and we found manganese. So now I know there are 12 points. There was a time in my life where I wouldn't have thought knowing that was critical, but I recognize now that we need to know every single dot.
Okay. Les adelanto porque esto para Carolyn, es muy importante porque está utilizando simbolismo numérico en la interpretación de los murales y entonces cambia totalmente el significado si son 11 puntos o 12 puntos y entonces poder determinar esto es fundamental.
Yeah. And the same thing with this. We have an antlered figure with black dots attached to its antler tines. I always, when I drew this figure, drew the antlers and then applied the dots. Well, guess what? The black dots were applied first, and then the red antler tines. So when this figure was painted, it looked like this to start with, and then they added the red paint. And interestingly, this particular figure is very complex. Using the dynolite, we were able to determine its relationship, this figure's relationship, with other figures, as you'll see here. So I'll show you the sequence that we found because this was astonishing. The mural in this section began like this, all black, only black first. Then the artist applied the red that's a part of the arch, and it covers the black. Then they applied the red that gives form to the anthropomorph, and the red goes over the top of the red arch and over the black of the arch as well. Then they applied the yellow paint, which fully sandwiched, integrated the anthropomorph into the arch. And last, they painted the white. So it's multiple layers. It's done in a very strict, rule-governed order in which they applied the paint.
Lo que se descubre aquí es que había un canon perfectamente bien definido de cómo se debía proceder a la realización de las pinturas.
I'll go through these slides fairly quickly. And if you want more information on this, please let me know. I use a software program called Harris Matrix Composer to diagram this stratigraphic data. This can be used for ceramics. This could be used for anything that you're studying that deals with stratigraphy. It's used for managing large-scale excavations, but I adapted it for use with rock art. And the idea behind this is you have to determine first what your least inclusive unit of analysis is. So for me, this figure that is composed of red, yellow, and black has 3 units of classification. His ID number, black, his ID number, yellow, his ID number, and red. These are each individual units, and they then go into the matrix as separate units. The top unit is the atmosphere. The bottom unit is the shelter wall. This, and then everything in between is the relationship between the atmosphere and the shelter wall. So in this case, you have this figure, A013, and we begin building the matrix. He is associated with this figure, this black figure here. The red figure is over the black figure in 2 places. So you see here is A013, he is over A005, which is this figure, over the black, and the black is directly interacting with the wall. So you start building relationships and you just keep going and going and going. Sometimes, and this is an important point for you, is that you will have, in this example, we have these L shapes. Each one of the L shapes has a black dot located at its tip. The black dots and the L shapes are over this figure and under this figure. These, however, are not in any stratigraphic relationship, but because they are congruent figures, identical figures, as a part of an overall pattern, they are incorporated into that stratigraphic layer. So they become a part of layer 2 in this case. And again, you just keep building and building and building until ultimately you have your matrix. They can be very complex. I suggest you are in a quiet room when you're doing this without any interruption. But this software affords the opportunity to collapse layers so that you can better manage and analyze it. So what you see here is where I've collapsed the different layers. And what I found was that there are 5 layers of black, 6 layers of red, 4 layers of yellow, and 3 layers of white. But in none of those cases does it break the rule. Black is always applied first, with red, then with black, then red, then yellow, then white. You never have in this mural yellow underneath red or black on top of red. Amazing. So I went back, I've created the mural for the entire panel now, not just individual illustrations. This is what the mural looks like today. When the artists were there thousands of years ago, it would have looked like this, their blank canvas. So I'll start the sequence now, and you'll be able to see the order in which the paint was applied to the wall.
No, qué maravilloso. Muchas gracias, qué maravilloso.
I have to tell you, true confession, when we as a team determined the sequence, I think I cried for 2 days. I'm an artist and an archaeologist. I know what this requires. And I then realized that there is no question that nothing is random or arbitrary, not even the order in which the paint is applied to the wall. Everything carries meaning.
Aquí lo interesante es que desde el principio ella sostuvo que era una composición y los arqueólogos se burlaron de ella y aquí está.
No. O sea, se necesita no ser nada más arqueólogo.
So, if you want, do we want to take a 5-minute break? Is it, my thing says it was just an hour.
Primero, hecho que...
Sí, tenemos tiempo.
Sí, ¿quieren tener una sesión de preguntas y respuestas sobre esta parte? Y luego pasamos a la segunda parte.
¿Quieren preguntar?
O comentar algo, todo.
¿Quieren preguntar algo ahora? Pues yo creo que sí, porque luego y ahorita está como la emoción.
Está fresco esto, ¿no?
No, a mí me emocionó. No sé si tenemos la luz, voy a preguntar a quién. Nos vamos a un descanso, nos vamos a final.
Sí, no, yo creo que si quieren, prendemos y hacen preguntas o comentarios.
Cierren los ojos. 1, 2, 3. ¿Cuánto? Bueno, yo primero. De tus primeros registros, Carolyn.
From your first recordings.
A esta ¿Entiendes español?
Poquito sí.
Pero yo te traduzco y
De los primeros registros a esta cosa que va a ser un chip de computadora. Desde el 86 hasta la semana pasada. ¿Cuántos años?
how many years have you been working since you became here?
26.
26.
Y este hallazgo, proposición de la manera como se está creando el mural, es que hay muchas cosas ahí atrás, porque luego platicamos de eso cuando acabe la interpretación. ¿Cuánto tiempo te llevó a ti entender esta parte final?
How much time did it take to you to understand this final thing? The structure, the composition, the whole process of painting.
O sea, ¿esto cuándo lo encontraste?
When did you
Porque
find out?
sigues emocionada con ella.
It was probably once I recognized that there was the need to understand this stratigraphy and started trying to solve it, it took about a year, I think, because I tried different techniques. None of them successful until I met my best friend. And then I was successful. And that was in 2013. So I published my first book that talks about the mural in 2003. And 10 years later, wow, incredible.
Yo quiero comentar algo aprovechando que está Francisco y el señor aquí, porque nosotros estuvimos, y Daniel también, en el proyecto La Pintura Mural Prehispánica en México. Francisco es artista plástico y él hace como una parte de la reconstrucción de muchos de los murales que están ya publicados.
Okay.
Pero la parte técnica, Carolyn, de esos estudios que se han venido haciendo por muchos años, tiene que ver con este mini microscopio que presentaste, que los primeros análisis que se hicieron aquí de este proyecto, se llevaban las muestras a microscopios de barrido. ¿Es lo mismo? No es igual, porque las fotografías que se publican en los primeros libros son idénticas y te hablan de cómo se está usando los pigmentos y qué capas se pone una encima de la otra, y en los otros estudios qué minerales y qué es lo que está formando los pigmentos. Pero yo pregunto, ¿es más o menos lo mismo, pero ahora como las computadoras de hace 20 años y las de hoy?
No.
No.
Carlos lo usa y él te puede explicar. Tú lo usas, ¿no, Carlos?
Sí, el microscopio electrónico de barrido es una cosa que es muy sofisticada.
Ajá.
Y es para otro tipo de análisis. Este es un microscopio como cualquier otro, pero el chiste es que es portátil. O sea, que se puede llevar y es electrónico, puedes tomar fotos y videos, pero lo puedes llevar a campo y tiene una buena resolución, hasta 5 megapíxeles,
pero tiene una limitación, digamos.
Sí, solo es para aumentar tamaño. Sí, para ver de cerquita. Y el microscopio electrónico de barrido es algo mucho más elaborado para ver otro tipo de cosas. Elementos, traza.
Y esto no necesitas tomar las muestras en el otro
no,
sitio.
no,
La gran diferencia es
no
esa.
Pero no te dice lo mismo tampoco.
Claro.
Son cosas diferentes.
Son diferentes. Una de las cosas que quiere destacar Carolyn es que todos los métodos que utiliza son no intrusivos. No intrusivos, no afectan a la pintura de ninguna manera, porque el principal objetivo es la preservación y la documentación es para que se preserve a pesar de que con el tiempo se sigan deteriorando. Porque ella no lo explicó, pero este tipo de roca se está desescamando a una escala muy rápida, y entonces la única manera de preservarlo es a través de la documentación, y todos son métodos no intrusivos.
Para agregar una cosa, lo que sí puede ser relativamente similar es el RX, el espectrómetro portátil.
Sí,
Ese es un desarrollo también reciente, es barato, lo llevas, tampoco es invasivo y te dice la composición mineral de los pigmentos.
no, about the
PXRF.
XRF.
Yeah.
¿Cuántas capas estratigráficas?
How many stratigraphic layers did you find?
I need to go back and look. Más o menos 15, I'd have to go back. Yeah, there's, I think, 5 of the black. I need to look, yeah, multiple. And it's interesting, the order of even the black. The first black paint that's applied, as it turns out, is associated with a figure that has now been identified as being associated with the moon. So I think that's interesting because the moon is from the beginning.
Cuando hablas de las reglas que seguían para la composición, ¿estas se aplican en todos los espacios o nada más está trabajado para este lugar?
She's asking if the rules that you're talking about are there, they are applied in all the murals or
Okay.
only in this one?
Okay, we're still learning. At a site actually that this figure comes from, we found the same order, black, red, yellow, white. And there is a figure at this other mural that has the black dots associated with the antler tines, and it's the same thing. The black dots were applied before the red antler tines. It's very interesting. But at another site on the west side of the Pecos River, it looks like they don't use that rule, which is very interesting. So we have much to learn. This takes a lot of time, as you can imagine, to do this. I think I have 696 microscopic images from the White Shaman site. And I don't know how many we've collected at Rattlesnake Canyon, thousands.
Microscopic?
Yeah,
Probably about 500 to 600.
500 to 600 at this point. Oh, we didn't finish. We didn't get finished. Yeah.
Okay. Para que se entienda bien, son 200 sitios que tienen localizados. Y entonces en cada sitio se han tomado 600 fotografías estratigráficas, pero para hacer esto para todos los sitios, imagínense todo el tiempo que llevaría. Entonces, ahora todavía no es posible definir con certeza si en todos los sitios se aplicó el mismo procedimiento, sino esto va a llevar un buen de tiempo de hacer todas esas lecturas estratigráficas en la mayor parte de los sitios. Entonces, por lo pronto, lo que se ha verificado es que en los sitios que han registrado, esta ha sido la regla. Pero todavía no saben si es lo mismo para todos y han encontrado 1 o 2 casos donde es probable que no hayan seguido puntualmente la misma regla.
Y están aplicando entonces el mismo método, van a aplicar el mismo método
Por supuesto,
de abordaje.
hasta que ya tengamos que...
Sí,
Hola, sobre técnica de datación, ¿qué nos puedes decir? ¿Cómo estás fechando las pinturas?
How are you dating the paintings?
There are 30 dates for the Pecos River style. They come from locations in the mural where the paint, in some cases, is about to fall away, and very careful to remove that one piece. Some are from when the research was first beginning, from spalls that were on the ground that they found. But now what we do is to remove a piece that's about to go away, but we also date the wall, the blank wall next to it, because the Karen Steelman that we work with, the chemist, has said that there are organics in the wall that are not a part of the paint. So you have to be sure you're not just getting a date for the wall. So that's the way we do it. And she now is she gets a date for the calcium oxalate layer on top of the paint. She dates the paint and she dates the layer underneath. That's very expensive. $1,500, $1,500, $1,500 for one day, for one thing. So,
Sí, quedó claro.
Lo último, pero
Se vayan rompiendo sus cochinitos.
¿De qué tamaño tendría que ser la muestra que se toma del pigmento para fecharse?
What would be the size of the...
about the size of my fingernail. Only about a centimeter, maybe,
Como
about
un
like that.
centímetro, sí.
I like that. Thumbnail is great, but you can do with less.
Que lo ideal sería un tamaño de la uña del dedo pulgar, pero con una muestra del tamaño de la uña del dedo meñique es suficiente.
Okay, gracias.
Yeah, but the way that this is collected, it has to be collected very specifically with gloves and sterile equipment and aluminum foil and to avoid contamination. So it's very important.
Sí, se entendió que es muy importante evitar la contaminación de la muestra, entonces tiene que ser tomada con muchísimo cuidado, con guantes, recogerla en aluminio, etcétera, en algodón, en fin, con elementos esterilizados para que entonces las fechas de los materiales que la contaminan no afecten la precisión del fechamiento del radiocarbono.
Okay.
10 minutos.
Okay.
10 minutes
Oh,
break.
okay, good.
¿Está bien?
Yeah, see?
Sí, sí,